Top 30 wide receivers heading into Week 13. The first guy, who else would it be but Davante Adams? This guy's having a great season. He's making big plays for this Green Bay Packer team. And he's a guy you can't stop. Most corners, they try to stop him, but they can't. It seems like he gets a touchdown each and every week is Davante Adams. And in this game versus Philly, I could see him have a huge game and a field day versus him going over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. I could see him have. So he's number 1. Number 2, DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. Metcalf here, this guy's a man among boys, and we saw him last week with a 10-catch, 177-yard ball game. And he left some yards out there as well as Metcalf. He could add over 200 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns in that ball game, and he dropped a couple easy ones. Jim Schwartz said he was no Calvin Johnson, supposedly, and that motivated Metcalf, and he had a Calvin Johnson Megatron type of ball game versus Schwartz's defense in Philly. This week he's got the New York Giants, where I don't care who's going to cover him, James Bradbury or whoever. I could see Metcalf go for 100, 150 yards in this game. He's one of the best receivers already, and it's only his second year. He's got a lot to prove in his mind after so many teams passed him up, and he fell to the end of the second round in drafts. So DK Metcalf, another big game, another huge performance I see this week for him. So he's number 2. Number 3, Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs. Tyreek the Cheetah. What a ball game last week. He was burning DBs on Tampa Bay up and down the field in that first quarter, where he finished with 203 yards and 2 touchdowns in that first quarter. He finished the ball game with 274 yards, I believe, and 3 touchdowns on 13 catches. Hill, he's having an amazing fantasy season. A lot of catches, a lot of targets. He's only had one game where he didn't reach double digits in PPR leagues. So Tyreek Hill, he's been a monster this year, and I got him ranked number 2 the rest of the season. But this week versus Denver, I could see him. He's not going to score 60 fantasy points again like he did last week, but he's going to score, I think, 25 to 30. And Tyreek Hill, he's having a great season. He's more than a deep ball threat. We see him run a lot of routes now, but last week he put on a show in that secondary, and I think he has a good one here versus Denver. Number 4, DeAndre Hopkins of the Arizona Cardinals. Hopkins, I don't know what's going on over there, but the targets have gone down, and obviously the touchdowns go down coming with that. And this week he's got a tough matchup versus the Rams. He's going to have Jalen Ramsey most likely shadowing him all of the ball game or most of it. But this guy, he's one of the best receivers in the league. In my opinion, he's still a top 5 option each and every week. Even with the tough matchup this week, I think he's going to find ways to get open. He's still going to make plays. This is on Kyler Murray more than anyone. He's got to get Hopkins the ball, because you could throw Hopkins open. And this guy, he's got the best hands, most, in my opinion, in the NFL. So I know it's tough, but I got him in number 4. Number 5, Keenan Allen of the Los Angeles Chargers. What a season Allen's put together this year. Every week it seems like it's a touchdown scored for him or a double-digit catches made for him. And this week though, he's going to have Stephen Gilmore shadowing him most of the ball game, I would suspect. And he's one of the best corners, if not the best, in all the NFL. But Allen, he's a top 5 talent, I believe. This guy's a great route runner. He don't care who's covering him. And Justin Herbert, he's a stud of a quarterback. And he's another guy, him and Allen, they just find ways to make plays together, and he could get him open. So I think Allen, he'll still have a decent game. Don't expect a huge ball game out of him with Gilmore on him. But he's still a guy I got to have in the top 5, which the way he's making catches and scoring touchdowns. Number 6, Justin Jefferson, the impressive rookie of the Minnesota Vikings. And this week he's got a good matchup. It's Justin Jefferson versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, who give up a bunch of fantasy points to wide receivers. It's another home game for Jefferson. He had 2 touchdowns last week in Adam Thielen's absence. And this week, I think he's going to find the end zone once again. And it wouldn't surprise me if he finds it 2 or 3 times in this game. He's a matchup nightmare. He's breaking all kinds of rookie records. And this guy, he's on a pace for a historic season. People might think he's a little high ranked here at number 6. But with this matchup versus Jacksonville, who gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers, how can I not have Justin Jefferson up here in the top 10? And I have him number 6. Number 7, A.J. Brown another impressive receiver here in his second year for the Tennessee Titans. And since he got back, this guy scored a touchdown in every game except one since he came back from injury. Last week we saw him have a crazy touchdown, and then he had a onside kick recovery touchdown return. So A.J. Brown, he's doing it in all facets of the game. This guy, he makes route running look easy. DBs can't guard him. This guy, he's a big guy too. So once he's in the open field, he's gone. We've seen him take some touchdowns 60 or 70 yards to the house a few times this year. We saw it last week on a slant route, a basic slant route. He just took it to the house and burned the secondary. So Brown, he's got a great matchup this week versus Cleveland. They give up tons of fantasy points to wide receivers, and I see a big ball game out of A.J. Brown, and I think he finds the end zone once again here versus Cleveland. Number 8, Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings. It looks like he's coming off the COVID list, and this guy, he's a touchdown machine this season. I know his yards haven't been there, but he's got a great matchup versus Jacksonville. Him and Jefferson, a great 1-2 punch for Kirk Cousins and this Minnesota Viking offense. And I think Thielen's going to find the end zone as well in this game. I think Minnesota, the offense is going to explode. Everyone's going to eat in this one. And Thielen, I think he'll get 70 or 80 yards in this ball game and a touchdown. It's another home game. They play way better at home, Minnesota, and they're going to take advantage. Number 9, Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. He's got a good matchup versus New Orleans. He's looked pretty decent with double-digit fantasy games in his last 2 weeks now since he came off that ankle injuries, Ridley. Julio Jones, we don't know if he's going to play this week, but if he plays or not, Calvin Ridley at this point, he's probably the better receiver over there in Atlanta. He's a great route runner. His second year or third year, I believe it is, and him and Matt Ryan, they're just locked in with their rapport and those timing routes. And Ridley, he could beat you deep, he could beat you underneath, and this week versus New Orleans, in a game that I think's a possible shootout, he's going to beat him a few times possibly for at least 1 and maybe 2 touchdowns I see in this game. So I got him at number 9. Number 10, Stefon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills here. Diggs, his numbers have gone down the last few weeks, but this Buffalo team now going on the road 3 out of the 4 next ball games, and they want to get off to a good start. Diggs, he's going to verse San Francisco this week. This game's going to be in Arizona, though. These all San Francisco home games at Arizona the rest of the year. It's an indoor game. Diggs, he's familiar with the field. They played there a few weeks ago versus Arizona, and he had over 100 yards in that game. This week he's going to have Richard Sherman on him. I think it's going to be a pretty tough matchup, but Diggs, this guy, he's a deep ball threat. He's a great route runner, and each and every week he's a top 10 option at wide receiver in my opinion. So he's 10. Number 11, Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. Robinson here, he's better with Mitchell Trubisky in the lineup, and we saw it last week with about 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. And now this week he's got a Detroit team that gives up the 11th most amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. And I think Robinson, he can find the end zone again here. This game, I think, will be a tight battle. Will be a neutral type of game of throwing and passing. But Robinson, his outlook's way better, in my opinion, with Trubisky, because Trubisky, he could stretch the field at least and get Robinson on a deep ball or 2 as well, with Nick Foles was more underneath than just throwing short routes. So I got Robinson at 11. Number 12, Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks. Lockett here, Mr. Inconsistent this year. But this guy, he's still a top 12 option each and every week just off what he could do. And we saw him a few weeks ago go off with 15 catches, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns versus Arizona. This week he's got the New York Giants coming to town, and they got to pick their poison if they're going to try to stop DK or Tyler, and I don't think they're going to stop any of them. But the only thing in Seattle, if one guy has a huge game, the other guy usually takes a step back and only scores a few fantasy points. But this week, I think both these guys are going to have huge ball games. But Lockett, I'm going to be conservative and have him 12 here. Number 13, Scary Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team. He's 7th the rest of the way in my rest of the season wide receiver rankings. So check that out if you haven't. But anyway, this week I got him at 13. It's a tough matchup versus Pittsburgh. They give up the fourth least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. So McLaurin, great route runner, one of the most underrated players and receivers in all of the NFL, in my opinion. But this week, it's just a matchup is why I bump him down to a 2 receiver this week. But I still think he could get a lot of garbage time points. If this ball game's out of hand, then he could find the end zone, I think, is McLaurin. But I'm not expecting a huge game out of him like we've got in the last few weeks. So I got him at 13. Number 14, Julio Jones of the Atlanta Falcons. So Jones, he's had a bad hamstring just about the whole season. He missed last week's ball game with the hammy versus the Vegas Raiders. But this week versus New Orleans, he's going to be a game-time decision most likely. Jones, he's practiced on and off this week. And he's got a good matchup versus New Orleans. And this is the ball game where he re-aggravated that hamstring in week 11 was Jones. But here in week 13, if he does play, it's a good matchup. I think he'll get open. He won't be 100% in my opinion. So he's a guy I could see only get 6 or 7 catches for 70 or 80 yards. That's a decent game, but I don't think it's going to be a huge game. I don't think he's going to be 100% by any means. He could even be a decoy if he's out there. So who knows? So I got him at 14 if he plays. If he's not, look for Russell Gage and Zacharias to take over Jones's workload. Number 15, Michael Thomas. We're staying in the same game versus Atlanta. He went over 100 yards for the first time this season 2 weeks ago versus this weak Falcon defense. And this week, the ball game's in Atlanta. You know, Taysom Hill, he don't like throwing the ball down the field. And I think they don't want him throwing it down the field, really, is Sean Payton and the Saints coaching staff. But anyway, Michael Thomas, he's still a top 15 option each and every week, even though he's banged up once again. He's been limited in practice, but I think he'll play. He's got a good matchup, but I don't think he'll have a huge game. Probably his ceiling is getting to that 100 yards in this one. So I got him here at 15. Number 16, Robert Woods of the Los Angeles Rams here. Woods, he's been a pretty good underneath and player this season for the Rams. And this week, he's got a good matchup. Is Woods versus Arizona. Patrick Peterson, though, most likely will be on him, but I think Woods, he could find open lanes and he can make a few plays in this ball game, I believe, is Woods. So I wouldn't be surprised if Woods could get 50, 60 yards and find the touchdown. I know Jared Goff's been inconsistent and he's not been making plays as much as you want to see him and these receivers this season. But Woods, I still think he has a good game. And he's a guy that's a safe number 2 start this week at wide receiver. Like I said, number 17, Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Johnson here, he's been playing good this season. He's a target machine. We saw huge target amounts for him versus Baltimore. And this week, he's got a Washington team where I think he could find open lanes and have a huge game, where I could see him have a double-digit target and catch game. And going over 100 yards in this one's Johnson. Johnson, he does a little bit of everything over there in Pittsburgh. He's probably the number 1 now as far as volume, targets, and catches and stuff. With Claypool and Juju as a close number 2. But Johnson, him and Ben, they're on the same page. They're making plays. And this week, it's a great matchup for Johnson and the Steelers. And I think he'll make a few plays in this ball game, like I said, and possibly go over 100 yards and find the end zone. Number 18, Kenny Golladay of the Detroit Lions. We don't know if Galladay's going to play. It looks like he's probably not. But if he does, I got him 18 on this list. And Golladay, he's got a bad hip. And that hip might cost him the rest of the season for all we know. We haven't seen him play in a few weeks. If Galladay's not going to go once again, it's going to be Marvin Jones and Marvin Hall in this one, with T.J. Hawkinson's target staying up there for the Detroit Lions. Number 19, Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams. Kupp, he's been an inconsistent fantasy player this year. And like I said about Woods, this has to do with Jared Goff more than anything. Kupp, we saw him have a huge game on Monday night a few weeks ago versus Tampa, where he almost hit 150 yards. And then last week, a total dud performance for Kupp versus San Francisco 49ers. So I don't know which Kupp's going to show up. He's a guy I still got to start with his breakout potential and just the way he could get open and get routes. They got to get him the ball more. He's in Arizona this week, so it's another indoor game, which is always a plus, that you don't got to deal with weather. But Kupp here, I think he's a safe number 2 to flex option, so I got him at 19. Number 20, Brandon Cooks of the Houston Texans. With Will Fuller going down on the PED suspension, Brandon Cooks, he's the number one receiver over there in Houston, and now the volume's going to be there, the targets are going to be there. He's had all double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues, is Cooks, since week 6, so he's heading in the right direction, and now with more of a workload, this is a guy that's probably a number 2 receiver the rest of the season for your fantasy teams. He plays with an amazing quarterback who's top 5 in Deshaun Watson, so I think Brandon Cooks, he'll have a good outlook, he'll have a decent game, and I think he'll add at least double digits once again in this one. And I think he's a safe guy in number 20. Number 21, Chase Claypool, the phenomenal rookie of the Pittsburgh Steelers. This guy each and every week, anywhere from 12 to 20 fantasy points for him. He gets his catches, he makes plays, and he's a matchup nightmare. Just a lot of mouths to feed over there in Pittsburgh and Big Ben. But in this one versus Washington, I could see Chase Claypool burn that secondary and find pay dirt in this ball game. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does crack the 100-yard barrier and find the touchdown. But some weeks you can't, predict what's going to happen in this Steeler offense and who's going to have the big game. So Claypool, he's a number 2 to flex option. So I got him at 21. Number 22, Devontae Parker of the Miami Dolphins. He's a guy I have on my start list as long as Ryan Fitzpatrick plays. And we saw Parker last week in a great matchup versus the Jets with 119 yards on 8 catches, and he had 14 targets in that game. This week, another great matchup versus Cincinnati coming to town. And I think Parker, he could crack that 100-yard mark again as long as Fitzpatrick's playing. So if he's playing, Fitz as the starter, he's a number 2 option for sure. If not, his value goes down. And I don't know if he's even a starter with Tua in there. Tua, he just makes that whole offense fantasy-wise not appealing and not guys worthy of starting on most weeks. Devontae Parker, I have him at 22. 23, Juju SmithSchuster of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's the 3rd guy over there. It seems like Claypool and Deontay Johnson, their fantasy days and targets are more consistent than Juju. Juju, I got him ranked 25th rest of the season at the receiver position. This week I got him at 23. It wouldn't surprise me either to see him get about 100 yards and a touchdown. It's a great matchup versus Washington. I think the ball's going to spread all over the field, and the Steelers, they're going to make plays, and they're going to win this ball game easy. But Juju, I think he's still a number 2 to flex option this week. 24, Corey Davis of the Tennessee Titans. Davis, he's been great since he came off COVID list in week 6, and Davis, he's got double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues since then, every game except the one where he had the old goose egg. But Davis, a great matchup versus Cleveland this week that gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. And Davis, he's going to have one-on-one coverage once again. He's a quick receiver. He was a big prospect out of college, and now he's got a quarterback that actually could get him the ball in Ryan Tannehill, unlike Marcus Mariota. So Davis, I like him this week. He's a number 2 option to flex. I think he could get anywhere from 80 to 100 total yards and have a touchdown in this one. 25, Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys. He's got a tough matchup, I know, versus Baltimore, and that's why he's borderline this week, a number 2 to flex option. And he's a guy I could see him have a total dud game or have a decent game. And Cooper this year, he's been very solid. He's only had 1 or 2 games without double-digit fantasy points. And one of them was Ben DiNucci behind center. Cooper's getting targets. He's still one of the better route runners in all of pro football, and he's the number 1 over there. Andy Dalton, I know he's not great. I know the O-line's banged up, but this is a game where I could see Cooper get his points in garbage time when Dallas is down early and often versus Baltimore. Number 26, T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. T. Higgins, what a great rookie season for him this year. He surpassed A.J. Green weeks ago in that starting lineup, and he's making plays and getting open. With Joe Burrow going down, though, him and Tyler Boyd, their fantasy appeal and their value goes down a little, but Higgins still found the end zone last week with Brandon Allen in there versus the New York Giants. But this week the task's going to be tougher versus a good Miami Dolphin defense. So Higgins, I think, have a mediocre game, but he's a guy you still got to start each and every week with his upside and playmaking ability. Number 27, Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. He's got a decent matchup versus Buffalo this week. This is going to be an indoor game played in Arizona since The breakout's been bad in Los Angeles, so their home games for Frisco will be in Arizona. Deebo last week broke out in his comeback game with 11 catches, 133 yards. This guy's a gadget guy. They use him all over the field. Brandon Aiyuk, he's coming back this week, I know. But still, Samuel, I like the matchup. I like how they use him in the offense. And they're probably going to be trailing, so he's going to get high usage and a lot of looks. So he's 27. 28, Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts. Another impressive rookie in this great draft class. He's come on the scene the last few weeks since he came back from injury. Phillip Rivers trusts him. This guy's an explosive receiver. He makes plays yard after catch. We saw last week with a nice touchdown down the sidelines making a play. And this guy, he's got a knack for the end zone. And Pittman, it wouldn't surprise me this week versus Houston in another indoor game if he finds the end zone and has a breakaway score. So this week, he's good as a flex option, and I got him at 28. Number 29, Tyler Boyd of the Cincinnati Bengals, just like T. Higgins. See, the value goes down. Tough matchup versus Miami, but this guy's a good route runner. He finds ways to get open. He gets a lot of targets, and if they're down early and often in this game, Cincinnati's going to throw a whole lot, and Tyler Boyd, he's still going to make a few plays, I think, and have a decent game, but I got him safely here at 29. And number 30, DJ Chark of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's going to come back this week after he didn't play last week, was Chark versus the Cleveland Browns, and he's got a good matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings, who give up the third most fantasy points to wide receivers. It's an indoor game. Gardner Minshew looks like he's going to come back in this game. Chark, he's taken off the injury report already, so he's good to go. Maybe he could catch a deep ball or two in this one, and you know they're going to be trailing, so there's going to be a lot of volume, hopefully, and a lot of plays for him to get open. So that's the top 30 receivers I have ranked heading into Week 13.